So Violet, I shared with you and Martha Mahatma a new intervention that we're sharing with everyone. Some people have gotten to use it, and to sort of ruin the surprise a little bit, you mentioned sand tray. And you have applied your theory, your model to using sand tray. And I'm wondering if you could just share a few thoughts about how you adapted sand tray for your model. And then we're going to actually see an example of it.
Well, the thing that's so wonderful about the sand tray is that you don't have to draw figures. You have them right there because we use all these little figures. We make a scene in the sand using many different kinds of figures. And I've had people doing sand trays just from nature, using twigs and leaves and whatever they can find around. I've done sand trays on the beach using seaweed and shells, and it was just amazing. But luckily, we have actual figures that we put in the sand to represent a scene. And when you say that to kids, I want you to make a scene in the sand, you have to be more specific, because some kids, I discovered, think they draw their fingers around in the sand. So I used to show them a couple of photographs of sand tray scenes so they get the idea, use these figures. And so it's hard to have figures in a Zoom. I mean, well, you're going to be blown away by what we have here to show you today.
Great, great. Thank you. Kathy, Kathy Mew, I'm going to turn this over to you to share this. Because Violet, as I told you, Kathy was at the training and watched the sand tray, watched you do the demonstration with Henry. So she really got a sense of it before she made the virtual version that you're going to share now. So I turn this over to you, Kathy.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. You might have seen me before I think it might have been this, I don't know, one of the early sessions where we actually launched a virtual product for the picture cards. We called it the projective cards, and you can find them also on the oaklandertraining.org website. So Karen and I, we always get into a lot of trouble together, brainstorming what we could do. During this time, we're finding, obviously technology is becoming more and more important. And so we've accelerated some of our crazy idea development into actual working tools, which is awesome. And so, really taking advantage of shelter in place to get some of these tools out to you. So I'm going to share my screen. So there's two ways to get to this tool, and it's, no surprise, it's a virtual sand tray. Karen and I were unable to find anything that was already built and available. So, thank you to Karen for, indicating this need and then helping to motivate myself and my partner, Mike, in actually getting it executed. So what you do is go to oaklandertraining.org. When you click on the button to enter the site, you can find the sand tray in the tools and resources menu. You could also get there by just going to this URL, sandtray.oaklandertraining.org. And I'm happy to provide that URL to you after I stop sharing my screen in the chat so you can access it later. And so what this is the tech version of your physical sand tray. I had heard some pain points of, well, how do you, one, what do you do when the child doesn't have the physical sand tray in front of them? How would you use this intervention, right? And so it could get complicated sending them a sand tray, sending them all the miniatures, right? You wouldn't have that breadth that you normally do. in terms of the figures you would have in your office. And the other thing is, even if they had the physical setup, instructing them how to point a camera at themselves and a second camera at the tray, it just sounded like it was too complicated. So what you do is, there's two ways of having this shared with your client. You can either send them the same URL I'm about to send you, and they through Zoom can share their screen just like I am. Or there's another way where you have it on your screen, and then you through Zoom grant them permission to move your own mouse. So then the website is on your computer, and the client drives your computer. It's up to you, and whichever you prefer. In this case, I have the URL on my screen and I'm sharing my screen. So here what we have is all of the figures on the left-hand side that your client can choose to make the scene. There are 7 tabs, and so we've tried to group them in a semi-logical way. So all of the things on the first tab are kind of like mythical, fantasy, and nature. The second one is all creatures, so like insects and animals of different types, you know, aquatic, flying. The third tab are people of various sorts, so medieval, current, ninjas, superheroes, different professions, families, children of various ages. And we tried to get some good representation in terms of like persons of color. 4 is more nautical of a tab, so you can have a scene with water. It's not going to be as messy as in person. Boats and other nautical type figures. 5 is more military, so soldiers and the like. 6 is vehicles and various buildings. And then 7 are other kind of like landscape or weather related scene figures or miniatures that the client can put down. So that's just the overview of the gallery. You know, it's relatively easy for us to add pictures. You know, we've actually painstakingly gone through a library to try to format them and get them on the right size and everything. But as you can see, we have a rather large library versus, you know, in person, you having to send a client, you know, hundreds of figures to represent all of the things that we have here. So I'll get into the more fun stuff. So when you ask your client to make a scene, all they have to do is from the library, you know, after they're done browsing, you know, select what they want. So maybe they want the king, and then so they'll click on the king and he'll show up here on the right-hand side. They have the option to move the king around. They have the option to make him bigger. They might want to add the dragon. Maybe make him bigger as well. Maybe make the king a little smaller relative to the dragon. So they have a lot of flexibility, much more than they would with a physical figure. And then, you know, let's say they love the idea of having this, I don't know, it's actually a Loch Ness monster, I guess. Let's say they want multiple of him. They just need to, they can go back and click him, or when they click copy, there's multiple versions of him now. So you don't need to have hundreds of Loch Ness figures physically. The beauty of technology is now it's been duplicated, and that might come useful for things like the military scene. I know I've seen in certain demos with Violet, there are kids who like to create like armies. Well, they just need to copy this guy a couple times and then they've got their army, right? But let's say they want this army to help the king out, and you see he's kind of facing the wrong way. So they just need to flip, and then soldier, just like in real life, can be pointed in the right way. Have a little catapult here. Just to show you what the other parts of the tool are. So you saw copy, right, which duplicates the figure on the screen. You saw flip, which makes them turn the other direction. Let's say you think this scene shouldn't have the king. Well, then you just delete him off and the king is no longer there. Or let's say what can happen is the child forgets, oh, I didn't put the water down yet, and they pick a icon with the water and stretch them out. But what you'll see is, okay, well, the water is covering the dragons now. So we have these back and front buttons to send the picture to the back or the front in terms of layers. So here, if you send the water to the back, now the dragons are on top of the water as they should be. So I'll pause there. Oh, actually, one last thing. If you want the client to save the picture, this button will save this to their computer. If you gave them control to your computer, when they press save, the picture will show up on your desktop or your computer. You know, if they're doing it on their computer, you might ask them to email it to you if you want a copy, or you can take a screenshot, right? Like just from Zoom, you can take a screenshot of what I have here. Or when you're done, you can ask them to clear the canvas or the sand tray, and it's like taking out all the figures without all the sand coming with it and cleaning with it. It just magically vanishes. So I'll pause there now. Karen, I don't know if you wanted to do questions or whatnot, but I'll provide the link.
Yeah, for sure. We'll provide the link. I think someone put it in the chat. And then there's a few, while you're here, someone's asking maybe some technical questions. Can I use this on Google Meet?
So it can be used with any screen sharing program. I think that's probably the equivalent of Zoom, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, all you have to do is in your web browser, go to the tool and share your screen, whether it's Google or Zoom or WebEx, whatever the tool is that you're using. And again, it depends on whether you want the client to go to the URL and share their screen, or whether you share your screen and then give access to your client to take control of your mouse.
Okay. And we just had a question, thank you, about gender. We can add that. Families of 2 moms, single parents, 2 dads.
Yeah, I'm trying to see, we have some individual components.
Thank you for that.
So you can build that, but for sure I tried to a little bit here, right? Here's 2 moms, 2 dads.
Oh, so it is there. It is there, yeah. I don't know if that's what you were referring to, but I thought we did. But so this is part of this is to get 90 people's feedback, and you're all going to have different points of view about it, which is what will make this a really wonderful, dynamic tool for everyone. So thank you, Kathy. That's great. I thought so, but I wanted to make sure I was responding to everything. Okay, so, and you're not going anywhere, right?
No, I'm not. I'll be around.
Is there a tutorial? No.
I think, yeah, you know, since we're recording this, we might.
Oh, that's true. We'll share
the clip online or something. Yeah.
We'll share this.
But you'll find we tried to build it as if it was a child using it. Mm-hmm. So yes, there might be some confusions, particularly with the back and the front button. I feel like the back and the front button might be used 5% of the time. Copy, flip, and delete are the only ones you really, really need to understand, and it's not too bad. We tried to replicate functions that you would have seen in other programs, perhaps like a Microsoft Word or things like that.
Yes, great. Thank you. Regular families don't want their children to know about 2 mom or 2 families. Is your name, okay, I want to get to that question. Okay, Kathy, thank you. This is amazing. This is so great. And
I just want to make one more point about the tool.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
So Karen, we soft launched the tool about 1 week ago. You know, we didn't make a big announcement or anything. It was just featured in part of your workshop. And since then, we've had over 700 uses of the tool in only a few days. So really excited about the potential here.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And Liz, I think you wrote in that you saw it. Okay, great. And then and I don't know if and Michelle, you also used it. When Kathy and I were talking about it and she gave me the link and we were just talking, I could barely focus on what she was saying because I was just playing with it, doing everything. So it's really amazing. And I could have thought of this idea for the next 50 years and never created it. And so, you have my gratitude, and I think I can speak for everyone, and a lot of people spoke for themselves on the chat, that it's fantastic. So Ka, you had a clinical question, and is it related to the sand tray, or is it just in general about families with two moms or two dads, just different gender configurations with parents? Sand tray. I'm not sure I understand, like if they have resistance to talking about that as a topic and they see that in the pictures, or that's their, oh, okay. Well, I mean, it's just among the options, I would say. And there's a lot of, it is our interest to have lots of options, and maybe it would be something to talk about with your client if they are resistant to it or have a problem with that kind of a thing. It's a discussion that you could have, and maybe it would be something that they actually just wouldn't want to choose for their sand tray. Okay, so Violet.
Yes.
Do you mind answering a question that someone has about the difference between sand play from, say, the Jungian play, psychodynamic theory, and the Oaklander theory?
Okay. Well, I know little. Well, I know about the Jungian method, Samtray. That the each object that we use, those small miniatures, have some sort of a meaning. They like, I don't know what they are because I'm not that familiar, but I know that certain things would represent uh, feelings or problems. I don't really know what they are, but I do. In the way that we use the sand tray, it's much like a drawing. We work with it. It's a little different than a drawing because you can move the figures at will, or and do various things with it. So we usually have the child describe what that sand tray is. This is my tray. It's a castle and it's a princess and she lives in the castle. And sometimes she wants to leave and she can't leave. And that's my tray. So it's sort of a make a little story. Well, if it's a story, I might say, well, then what happens or how does she get out? But we also might say, be that girl, princess, and talk about what it feels like to be trapped there. And it's nice, it's beautiful, but you don't want to be there, and so they can become, we get to motivate that by, often I'll say, you have to give the princess a voice, you be her voice, or I'll start asking right away. For instance, I had a boy, the minute he took three surfers, which were cake decorations. They make great sand tray toys. Three surfers, and he put them in the sand, and he was about 15, and he said, I'm done. So there wasn't much there, but it's about surfing. So right away I asked him to tell me a little bit about that, and he surfs. he knew a lot about surfing and the water and the waves and all of that. So I said, you have to be one of them. Who are you? You have to be one. And he said, oh, okay, I'm this one. And I start talking to that one immediately. Hi, surfer. What's the water like for you? And as he was talking, his hand went out and one of the surfers got knocked over. And I said, oh, what happened to him? And he said, he drowned. The surfboard hit him in the head and he couldn't get up and he drowned. And I said, well, what did you do? And he said, well, nothing I could do. I mean, I could have helped him, I guess, but he just drowned. And his voice got really low. So I decided we couldn't go any further because he was, obviously some feelings were coming up. So I said, you know, is there anything in your life that you've ever done like that, it was your fault? I guess he said, it's my fault that he fell over. And I said, is there anything that you've tried and it was too late? He said, he started to cry. And he said, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. What's all your fault? My parents, they fight over me. That's all they do is fight over me. And they're getting divorced and it's because of me and I don't know what to do. And all that came out of three little surfers in the middle of the sand. And so you can imagine we had a lot to deal with and work on. And anyway, so that's how we kind of work. We sometimes make a story, sometimes become each person, each object, and then I'll say, is there anything that you did here that reminds you of your life? And often sometimes they'll say, no. And I'll say, well, you know, I was remembering that you were telling me once that you something or other. And I say, oh, yeah. And sometimes but often they can think, well, I said I was king of the forest, and I can tell my brother and my sister what to do. So I'm like a king with them. And we can always connect. It's a projection. Everything they do is a projection of something inside them. And so can always connect it in some way, though not always. Sometimes it's in a symbolic level, and not exactly the way Jungian's everything is symbolic of something. It's more like the whole thing is, for example, I can only tell you, for example, I had a boy 6 years old, and every time he came in, he said, I'm going to do the same thing. He loved the sand tray, and he'd put lots of trees, which you get at a store that sells decorations for parties and things. And anyway, he'd put lots of trees, and I had a cave that I once got at a fish supply store, and he'd put the cave in the sand, and he'd put something inside the cave. And I said, what's in the cave? And he said, treasure. It's treasure in the cave. And nobody knows it's there because he put all these trees around it. And of course, in my mind, I've already, you know, even though I don't want to put my thoughts, feelings into their words, I thought this boy is a treasure. And his parents don't realize it. And I felt that way about him. Anyway, he did the same thing every time. And then one time, and he even put two soldiers, it would all be a little different, in front of the cave to guard the treasure. And then one time he put little animals around the trees. I said, you know, you have to be something here. Would you pick who you are or what you are. You have to be something. And I thought he picked the treasure, but no, he picked a little rabbit. And I said, okay, I'm going to talk to the rabbit. Rabbit, and you have to answer for the rabbit. Rabbit, why? What are you doing? Well, I'm hiding under the tree. You're hiding. You mean nobody can see you? Right. Something like that treasure. Yeah, I'm hiding, and and then he stopped. He didn't want to do it anymore. And you know, I think that when it begins to touch something emotionally for them, they don't want to go any further. So then I said, do you ever feel like that rabbit? Do you ever feel you need a place to hide? He said, yes. He said, I wish I had a place like that. And I said, well, what would you be hiding from? And he stopped. He wouldn't go any further. It was only 6 after all. So then the next week he comes in, I'm gonna do the same thing. He said that each time. And he put lots of trees and the treasure in the cave, something inside, and he had, and the rabbit was there. And this time he was able to say, I need a place to hide like that rabbit. And I said, who would you be hiding from? And he said, my parent, my mother, my father, they were always telling me what to do. Now it just so happened that both his parents were high-powered lawyers, and they were always in a hurry and were always saying, get dressed, do this. And the reason they brought him to therapy is he resisted doing everything they told him to do. He wouldn't get ready for school, and he was in his own time frame. And all of this began to come out. And the sand tray is just incredible. I love working with it. Of course, what you don't have in the technical sand here is you can't rub your hands through the sand.
That's right.
No, it's an incredible experience.
Truly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always had 2 sand trays. One could be wet and one was dry. And the wet, we could put water in it, more even than it had. And many kids absolutely loved pouring water into the sand. It's kind of like a developmental process that they missed because there was so much going on in their families of playing with mud and playing with that wet sand. It's very therapeutic.
For sure. For
Right.
sure.
A ver,
Whoopsie.
galletas.
Sorry. Who's not? If everyone
Ay,
could
creo que
just
no está la receta en la lista.
mute themselves.
Mamá. Galletas,
Okay.
dice.
All right, I'm going to mute everyone, and then Violet just unmute.
Ya.
Okay, so Violet, just unmute, just so we're not distracted. Okay. Thank you for telling us about it, because I know that you see it differently. Patrick has a point about the difference between Jungian and your way of using sand tray, Violet.
Okay.
Let me unmute. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I happen to have a very close friend who's a Jungian play therapist. So we've had many conversations about this. My sense is that one of the differences is that everything the Gestalt therapists are working in the Oaklander model, how we look at items in the sand tray and scenes in the sand tray is, as Violet was saying, projections of the self and all unowned parts of the self that then the process of therapy is to integrate and own them and to bring them together. my sense is that most of the Jungians who do play sand tray and play there in their work look at it from that the child is putting things in the sand tray that represent universal archetypes or mythological stories that all of us end up playing out in some respect in our lives. And so I think the Jungian, in some ways, tries to fashion the interpretation of the objects in the sand tray to the child as their understanding of how that child is acting out, fitting in, or playing out a mythological or archetypal story. And I think the people who are Jungian, into some degree, are fitting the child's experience into a broader theme outside of the experience of the child. And the Gestalt therapists tend to, I think, have the child own the things in the sand tray as part of them. Whereas, you know, I've seen even some Jungians who work with, like they work with adults, and an image comes up in a dream, and the Jungians might, so, you know, what do you associate with that image? What brings, you know, what is the associations you have of that image, to try to kind of get to some place, and do that also in sand tray work. If they put an apple into the story, it's not about the apple represents some part of them, but what's the representation of the symbolic meaning of apple. So that's my sense of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.